The city stretched out beneath me, like a glittering carpet of diamonds, 27 floors of success, separating me from the world I used to know. I held a glass of wine in one hand, my phone in the other, watching the screen light up with a number I did not recognize. My finger hovered over the decline button. Something in my gut told me to answer. Something that knew exactly who was on the other end of that call. The sound that erupted from my phone was barely human. Shrieking. Sobbing. A voice I had not heard in months but would recognize anywhere, even distorted by hysteria and rage. Joyce. My mother. The woman who gave birth to me and then spent the next 16 years wishing she had not. She was calling from county jail. That much I could hear from the automated recording that preceded her screaming. She had been arrested 3 hours ago. Assault and battery. The victim's name in the report? Mine. And now, from behind bars wearing an orange jumpsuit and whatever remained of her dignity, she was demanding that I fix it. That I drop the charges. That I post her bail. That I remember after everything she had done that she was my mother and I owed her everything. I let her talk. 10 seconds. 15. 20. Every word was a knife she had sharpened over decades, and she was throwing them all at me now. Ungrateful. Selfish. Heartless. A disappointment from the day I was born. How dare I do this to her? How dare I destroy her life? How dare I forget that without her I would be nothing? My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window. Designer suit. Corner office. Partnership at one of the most prestigious firms in the country. I had built an empire from the ashes of the childhood she had burned to the ground. And she thought I owed her. A smile spread across my face. Not a warm smile. Not a forgiving smile. A smile cold enough to frost the glass in my hand. I brought the phone back to my ear, waited for her to take a breath between accusations, and said just 2 words. Goodbye, Joyce. Then I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Same number. Same automated jail system. Same woman who had never learned that I was no longer the terrified 16-year-old she could break with a single word. I watched it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then I blocked the number and took a long, slow sip of wine. It tasted like victory. That was 3 days ago. 3 days since my mother tried to claw her way back into my life and found nothing but locked doors and restraining orders. 3 days since I chose myself over the woman who had never chosen me. And I can tell you without a single doubt in my mind that it was the most satisfying moment of my 33 years on this earth. But before I tell you how we got here, before I share the delicious details of Joyce's downfall, I need you to do something for me. If you believe that toxic people deserve consequences, if you have ever walked away from someone who tried to destroy you, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel because I am going to tell you exactly how I went from being the daughter my mother threw away to becoming the woman she could never touch again. And drop a comment telling me about your own story of breaking free. Now let me take you back to where this all began. My earliest memory of my mother is not a happy one. I was 5 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with a box of crayons and a coloring book. I had spent an hour carefully staying inside the lines, choosing colors that I thought would make her smile. When Joyce came home from work, I ran to her with the picture, so proud of what I had created. She glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds before handing it back to me and saying, "That is nice, sweetie, now go put it away, Mommy is tired." I watched her walk past me to the living room, kick off her heels and pour herself a glass of wine. She did not look at me again for the rest of the night. I kept that picture under my pillow for weeks, hoping for another chance to show her. That chance never came. Growing up with Joyce was like living with a roommate who barely tolerated my presence. She was not cruel, not in the obvious ways that people could see. She did not hit me. She did not scream at me. She just was not there. Not emotionally. Not in the ways that mattered. She worked as a secretary at a law firm downtown, and her schedule was demanding. I understood that even as a child. What I did not understand was why she could not find even a few minutes for me. Why bedtime was always rushed. Why parent-teacher conferences were attended with visible impatience. Why my birthday parties, when they happened at all, felt like obligations she was checking off a list. I learned to be self-sufficient early. By the time I was 7, I could make my own breakfast, pack my own lunch, and walk myself to school. Joyce would leave for work before I woke up and come home after dinner time. There was always money on the counter for pizza or takeout, along with a note telling me to do my homework and go to bed at a reasonable hour. I told myself this was normal, that all kids had mothers who were too busy to tuck them in. that I was being mature and helpful by not needing her attention. But late at night, when I heard the neighbors reading bedtime stories to their kids through the thin walls of our apartment, I would pull my blanket over my head and cry as quietly as possible. The year I turned 8, everything changed. Joyce met Mark at some charity function her law firm was hosting. He was a sales manager for a pharmaceutical company, charming and well-dressed, with a smile that seemed genuine. Joyce lit up around him in a way I had never seen before. Suddenly, she was coming home earlier. She was wearing nicer clothes. She was laughing on the phone in the evenings. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought maybe this would be good for us. Maybe having Mark around would make her happier. Maybe a happier Joyce would have room for me in her life. They dated for 6 months before he proposed. The wedding was small, just immediate family and a few close friends. I wore a pale pink dress that Joyce picked out for me and stood beside her as she married this man I barely knew. Mark was polite to me during the courtship. He asked about school, complimented my drawings when Joyce bothered to show them to him, and bought me small gifts on holidays. But there was a distance there, a careful boundary that made it clear I was Joyce's responsibility, not his. Still, I tried. I wanted him to like me. I wanted to be part of this new family they were building. Mark moved into our apartment 3 weeks after the wedding. Our 2-bedroom place suddenly felt cramped with another adult sharing the space. He took over the living room with his sports shows and conference calls. The bathroom schedule became complicated. The kitchen, which had always been my quiet refuge for making simple meals, was now his territory where he cooked elaborate dinners for Joyce. I found myself spending more and more time in my room trying to stay out of the way. When I did venture out, Mark was friendly enough, but it was clear he saw me as an inconvenience. A leftover piece of Joyce's past that did not quite fit into their present. 4 months after the wedding, Joyce made an announcement over dinner. She was pregnant. With twins. Mark was ecstatic. He jumped up from the table, swept Joyce into his arms, and spun her around while she laughed. I sat there with my fork halfway to my mouth trying to process what this meant. Joyce turned to me, her face flushed with happiness, and said, "You are going to be a big sister. Viola, isn't that exciting?" I nodded and forced a smile. Exciting was not the word I would have chosen. Terrifying felt more accurate. The pregnancy changed everything. Suddenly, Joyce had time. She had energy. She had patience. Just not for me. She spent hours researching cribs and strollers. She and Mark painted the 2nd bedroom, transforming my mother's former sewing room into a cheerful nursery, with soft yellow walls and hand-painted clouds. They attended birthing classes together, laughing and holding hands as they practiced breathing techniques. Joyce glowed in a way I had never seen before. She talked endlessly about names, about whether the twins would be identical, about what kind of mother she wanted to be. And every single conversation was a knife to my heart because it made one thing abundantly clear. She had never wanted to be that kind of mother to me. I tried to be involved. I offered to help paint the nursery, but Joyce said I would just make a mess. I suggested baby names, but Mark had already made a list, and Joyce agreed with all his choices. I asked if I could come to one of the ultrasound appointments, but Joyce said it was better if it was just her and Mark, that it was a special bonding time for them as a couple. I was 9 years old, and I was already being pushed out of a family I had never really been part of. Kevin and Alice were born on a freezing January morning. I was at school when Joyce went into labor. Mark picked me up early, his face pale with stress and excitement, and dropped me off at a neighbor's house on the way to the hospital. "Stay here until we call you," he said. "Mrs. Patterson will take good care of you." Then he was gone. I sat in Mrs. Patterson's living room, watching children's television shows I had outgrown years ago, waiting for a phone call that did not come until nearly midnight. "It is a boy and a girl, Mrs. Patterson told me after hanging up. "Your mom and the babies are doing fine. You will see them tomorrow." I cried myself to sleep on her couch that night, not because I was sad about the twins, but because no one had thought to include me in the most important moment of my family's life. The first few months after the twins came home were chaos. The apartment was filled with crying, diaper changes, feedings, and an exhaustion that hung over everything like fog. Joyce quit her job to stay home with the babies. Mark took on extra hours at work to cover the lost income. And I became invisible. No one noticed when I made the honor roll at school. No one asked about my science fair project. No one remembered my 10th birthday until 3 days after it had passed, and then Joyce gave me $20 and a distracted apology. "I am so sorry, sweetie. Things have just been crazy with the twins." "You understand, right?" I understood. I understood that I was not a priority, that I had never been a priority, that these two tiny humans who could not even talk yet were more important to my mother than I had ever been. So I did what I always did. I took care of myself. I walked to school alone. I made my own meals. I did my homework without help. I went to bed without anyone checking on me. And I built a wall around my heart brick by brick, telling myself that I did not need Joyce's love anyway. When the twins were 2 years old, Mark got a promotion that came with a significant pay increase. Suddenly, there was talk of moving to a bigger place. Joyce spent weeks looking at houses online, showing Mark listings over breakfast, while Kevin and Alice made a mess with their Cheerios, and I ate my toast in silence. They finally settled on a 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood with good schools. 3 bedrooms. One for Joyce and Mark. One for the twins. And nowhere in their excited planning did I hear anyone mention where I would sleep. The day we moved in, I understood. The 3rd bedroom was designated as an office for Mark. He needs a quiet place to work from home, Joyce explained when she saw my face. You will take the converted attic space. It is like having your own apartment. You will love it. The attic was not an apartment. It was a cramped, poorly insulated room at the top of a narrow staircase. It was hot in the summer and freezing in the winter. The ceiling sloped so sharply that I could only stand up straight in the center of the room. There was a tiny window that looked out over the neighbors' garbage cans. But it was mine. And more importantly, it was far away from everyone else. I could disappear up there and no one would notice for days. Middle school was rough. I was awkward, shy, and desperately lonely. I did not know how to make friends. I had spent so many years taking care of myself that I did not know how to let people in. I ate lunch alone in the library. I walked home alone after school. I did my homework alone in my attic room. Joyce was too busy with the twins to notice. Kevin and Alice were starting preschool, which apparently required endless preparation and involvement. Joyce volunteered in their classroom. She organized playdates. She threw elaborate birthday parties with themes and decorations and goodie bags. She was the mother I had always wanted. She just was not my mother. Mark's attitude toward me shifted as I got older. The polite distance became barely concealed irritation. I was in the way. I was an expense. I was a reminder that Joyce had a life before him. He started making comments about how I needed to be more grateful for everything they provided, how I should be helping out more around the house, how I was old enough to get a part-time job and contribute financially. Joyce never contradicted him. She would just nod along, adding that yes, Viola could certainly be doing more to help with her brothers and sisters. Brothers and sisters. She said it like I was their sibling, not her daughter. Like we were all her children equally. But we were not equal. Not even close. By the time I turned 14, I was working part-time at a local grocery store bagging groceries and stocking shelves for minimum wage. I gave half of every paycheck to Joyce for household expenses, as Mark insisted. The other half I saved in a secret account at a bank downtown, one that Joyce did not know about. I had a plan forming in my mind, vague and desperate. I would save enough money to leave. To go to college somewhere far away. To build a life where I did not have to beg for scraps of attention from a woman who had never wanted me in the first place. The twins adored me, which made everything more complicated. Kevin and Alice followed me around whenever I was home, begging me to play with them, to read to them, to watch them do cartwheels in the backyard. They were sweet kids, innocent and loving in a way that broke my heart. They did not understand the tension in the house. They did not see the way Joyce's face tightened when I walked into a room. They did not hear Mark's muttered complaints about the extra mouth to feed. To them, I was just their big sister, and they loved me without question. I loved them too, which made what happened next so much worse. The summer I turned 15, Joyce sat me down for what she called a family discussion. Mark was there, his arms crossed, his expression stern. Kevin and Alice were at a neighbor's house. Joyce started talking about finances, about how tight things were, about how they were struggling to keep up with the mortgage and the twins' expenses. She said they had been talking and they thought it would be best if I started contributing more. Not just money, but time. She wanted me to take on more responsibilities with the twins. Pick them up from school. Make their dinners. Help with bath time and bedtime. Essentially, she wanted me to be a third parent. I was 15 years old. I said no. For the first time in my life, I stood up to her. I told her I already had a job. I was already giving her money. I was already doing chores around the house. I had my own homework and my own life to worry about. I could not be responsible for raising her children. Mark exploded. He said I was selfish, that I was ungrateful, that any normal teenager would be happy to help out their family. Joyce just sat there, her lips pressed into a thin line, nodding along with everything he said. When I looked at her, hoping for some sign of support, some acknowledgement that what they were asking was unreasonable, she looked away. That was when I knew. She was not going to protect me. She was not going to stand up for me. I was on my own. The next year was a nightmare. I took on the responsibilities Joyce demanded because I had no choice. I picked Kevin and Alice up from school every day, walking the mile to their elementary school and then the mile back to our house, the two of them chattering happily while I bit back my resentment. I made their dinners simple things like mac and cheese and chicken nuggets. I supervised their homework, helped them with art projects, and tucked them into bed while Joyce watched television downstairs and Mark worked late at the office. I was drowning in obligations that were not mine, and no one seemed to notice or care. My grades suffered. I went from being an honor roll student to barely passing some classes. My teachers noticed and called home, but Joyce did not take it seriously. She said I just needed to apply myself more to manage my time better. She did not ask what was wrong. She did not ask if I needed help. She just assumed I was being lazy. I stopped trying to explain. What was the point? She had never listened before. Why would she start now? I turned 16 in March. Joyce forgot until Alice mentioned it at breakfast 3 days later. "Oh, Joyce," said, looking up from her coffee. "Oh, honey, I am so sorry. We have just been so busy. We will do something this weekend, okay?" We never did. That weekend came and went without acknowledgement. No cake. No presents. No celebration. Just another reminder that I did not matter. 2 weeks later, everything fell apart. I came home from school on a Tuesday afternoon, exhausted from a math test I knew I had failed. Kevin and Alice were at a friend's house for a play date. The house was quiet when I walked in, which should have been my first warning. Joyce and Mark were sitting in the living room, and the look on Joyce's face made my stomach drop. "Sit down, Viola," she said. "We need to talk." I sat on the edge of the armchair, my backpack still on my shoulders, waiting for whatever bomb they were about to drop. Joyce started talking about money again. About how they had tried to make things work, but it just was not sustainable. About how they needed more space for the twins to grow. About how they had been talking to her parents, my grandparents, Paul and Diane, and they had agreed to take me in. Temporarily, Joyce added quickly. "Just until we get back on our feet. You understand, don't you, Viola? It is what is best for everyone." I could not breathe. Could not think. Could not process what she was saying. She was sending me away. She was sending me to live with her parents, people I barely knew because Joyce had always kept me at a distance from her extended family. Mark sat there, his jaw clenched, refusing to meet my eyes. I looked at Joyce, searching her face for some sign that this was a joke, a test, something other than what it sounded like. But her expression was resolute. She had already made up her mind. This was happening whether I wanted it or not. I asked why. Why now? Why me? Why not find another solution? Joyce sighed like I was being difficult. "Viola, you are 16 now. You are practically an adult. Kevin and Alice are still so young. They need us more than you do. And honestly, things have been tense between you and Mark. This will be better for everyone. A fresh start." I looked at Mark, and he finally looked back at me, his eyes cold. He wanted me gone. This was his idea, I could tell. And Joyce was going along with it because she always went along with whatever Mark wanted. I begged. I am not proud of it, but I begged. I promised I would do better. I would work more hours. I would give them more money. I would take care of the twins without complaint. I would stay out of their way. I would be invisible. Just please do not send me away. Joyce shook her head. "We have already talked to your grandparents. They are expecting you this weekend. Start packing your things." The conversation was over. I had been dismissed from my own family, like an employee being let go. Efficient. Cold. Final. I went up to my attic room and sat on my bed, staring at the walls I had decorated with posters and photos, trying to make this space feel like home. I felt numb. Hollow. Like someone had reached inside my chest and pulled out everything that made me human. I heard the front door open downstairs, heard Kevin and Alice's voices chattering excitedly about their playdate. I heard Joyce's voice warm and loving, asking them about their day. And I understood with perfect clarity that she was capable of being a good mother. She just did not want to be one to me. I spent the next 3 days packing my life into 2 suitcases and a garbage bag. Joyce helped going through my closet and drawers with mechanical efficiency, tossing clothes into boxes. Some of this you have outgrown, she said, holding up a sweater I had not worn in 2 years. We can donate it. I did not argue. I did not have the energy. Mark avoided me entirely, staying late at work or hiding in his office when he was home. Kevin and Alice knew something was wrong. They kept asking why I was packing, where I was going. Joyce told them I was going to stay with Grandma and Grandpa for a while, that it would be like a fun adventure. Alice cried. Kevin asked if he could come visit me. Joyce said maybe, but her tone made it clear that would not be happening. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling. My grandparents were supposed to pick me up at 10. I woke up at dawn, unable to sleep, and sat in my room watching the rain run down my tiny window. This was really happening. Joyce knocked on my door at 9:30 and told me to bring my things downstairs. I hauled the suitcases down the narrow attic stairs, struggling with the weight, and no one offered to help. Mark was in the kitchen, pointedly reading the newspaper. Kevin and Alice were watching cartoons in the living room. Joyce stood by the front door checking her watch. My grandparents arrived right on time. Paul was a tall man with kind eyes and silver hair. Diane was petite and soft, spoken with Joyce's same bone structure, but none of her coldness. They looked uncomfortable standing on the porch, like they were not sure this was the right thing to do, but did not know how to say no to their daughter. Paul loaded my suitcases into his truck while Diane tried to make small talk with Joyce. The conversation was strained, full of long pauses and forced pleasantries. I hugged Kevin and Alice goodbye. They clung to me, crying, asking when I was coming back. Soon, I lied, smoothing Alice's hair. I will see you soon. Mark grunted a goodbye from the kitchen, never looking up from his paper. Joyce walked me to the door, her hand on my shoulder in a gesture that might have looked motherly to anyone watching. Take care of yourself, Viola, she said, and help your grandparents around the house. Do not be a burden. Those were the last words my mother said to me before closing the door in my face. I stood on the porch in the rain, my grandfather's hand gentle on my shoulder, and I felt something inside me shatter. Not my heart. I had known for years that Joyce did not love me the way a mother should. What shattered was my last fragile hope that things might change, that she might realize what she was doing, that she might choose me just once. But she had closed the door, and I was standing in the rain with 2 suitcases and a garbage bag being sent away like I was nothing. Paul helped me into the truck without a word. Diane climbed into the passenger seat and turned to look at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I am so sorry, sweetie, she whispered. I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing. We drove in silence for 20 minutes, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm until we pulled up to a modest ranch house on a quiet street. This is home now, Paul said. For as long as you need it. And just like that, my life with Joyce was over. Paul and Diane's house was nothing like the place I had just left. It was smaller, older, filled with mismatched furniture and family photos covering every surface. But it was warm. That was the first thing I noticed. Not just physically warm, though. The heater was running and there was a quilt draped over the back of the couch. It was emotionally warm in a way I had never experienced. Diane showed me to the spare bedroom, which she had prepared with fresh sheets and a vase of flowers on the nightstand. This is your room, she said. You can decorate it however you like. I could not remember the last time anyone had given me permission to make a space my own. That first night, Paul made dinner. Homemade spaghetti with garlic bread and a salad. We ate at the kitchen table together, all 3 of us, and they asked me about school, about my friends, about what I liked to do for fun. They did not ask about Joyce. They did not ask why I was there. They just welcomed me like I had always belonged. After dinner, Diane brought out a photo album and showed me pictures of Joyce as a child, as a teenager, as a young woman. I barely recognized her. In these photos, she looked happy, carefree, nothing like the bitter, exhausted woman who had raised me. What happened to her? I asked. Diane closed the album, her expression sad. Life happened, she said, and she made choices. Bad choices. But that is not your fault, Viola. You are not responsible for your mother's unhappiness. The first few weeks at my grandparents' house were an adjustment. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. For Paul to start making comments about me being a financial burden. For Diane to get tired of having a teenager in her space. But it never happened. They were patient with me, kind in a way I did not know how to accept. Diane packed my lunch every morning and left it on the counter with a little note. Have a great day. We love you. Paul drove me to school and picked me up, asking about my classes and actually listening to my answers. They came to my school events. They celebrated my small victories. They treated me like I mattered. And slowly, painfully, I started to believe that maybe I did. But the wound Joyce had left was deep. I was angry all the time, a simmering rage that I did not know how to express. I would lie awake at night thinking about her, about Mark, about Kevin and Alice living in that house while I had been thrown out. I fantasized about revenge, about becoming so successful that Joyce would see what she had lost, about throwing her failures in her face, about making her hurt the way she had hurt me. Diane noticed. She sat me down one evening and asked if I wanted to talk about it. I told her everything, every painful detail of growing up with Joyce. Every moment of neglect, every broken promise, every time I had felt invisible in my own family. Diane listened without interrupting, and when I was done, she hugged me. "What your mother did was wrong," she said. "And you have every right to be angry. But do not let that anger consume you, Viola. Do not let her take any more from you than she already has." Her words stuck with me, but I was not ready to let go of the anger yet. It was fuel. It was what got me out of bed in the morning. It was what pushed me to work harder, study longer, achieve more. I threw myself into my schoolwork with a vengeance. My grades shot up. I joined the debate team, the honor society, every academic club I could find. I applied for scholarships and financial aid, determined to go to college without asking Joyce for a single penny. I worked weekends at the grocery store, saving every cent I could. I was going to make something of myself. And when I did, Joyce was going to know exactly what she had thrown away. My junior year of high school, Joyce called. It was the first time I had heard from her in almost a year. Diane handed me the phone with a worried expression, and I took it with shaking hands. Joyce's voice was bright and casual, like we had just talked yesterday. "Hi, honey, how are you? How is school?" I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to demand to know how she could just abandon me and then call like nothing had happened. Instead, I said I was fine. School was good. There was a long pause. Then Joyce asked if I could come over for Kevin and Alice's birthday party the next weekend. "They miss you so much." It would mean a lot to them. Not to her. To them. I told her I would think about it and hung up. I did not go to the party. But Joyce's call opened a door I had been trying to keep closed. She started reaching out more frequently after that. Phone calls every few weeks. Brief, superficial conversations where she asked about school and told me about the twins. She never apologized. Never acknowledged what she had done. Never asked how I was really doing or whether I was okay. She just pretended that everything was normal, that I had chosen to live with Paul and Diane, that we were a functional family with a slightly unconventional living arrangement. It made me sick. Paul's younger brother, Ronald, became an unexpected ally during this time. Uncle Ronald was about 10 years younger than Paul, a successful real estate developer who had never married. He visited often, usually bringing expensive takeout and stories about his latest deals. He was funny, irreverent, and he saw through Joyce's act immediately. One evening, after a particularly frustrating phone call with her, I was venting to Paul and Diane about how she acted like nothing was wrong. Ronald, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, spoke up. "Your mother has always been good at rewriting history," he said. "She did the same thing when she married Mark. Convinced herself that he was perfect, that they were building the ideal family, and anything that did not fit that narrative just got edited out. You got edited out, Viola. Not because there was anything wrong with you, but because you did not fit her story." His words were harsh but true, and they gave me permission to see Joyce clearly for the first time. She was not a villain in a storybook. She was not some monster. She was a deeply flawed woman who had chosen her own comfort and happiness over her daughter's well-being. And that was worse somehow, because it meant she had made a conscious choice. She had looked at me and decided I was not worth the effort. I graduated from high school at the top of my class. Valedictorian. Full scholarship to a prestigious university 3 hours away. Acceptance letters from a dozen other schools. It should have been the proudest moment of my life. Paul and Diane certainly treated it that way. They threw me a party, invited all my teachers and classmates, gave speeches about how proud they were. Uncle Ronald showed up with an envelope containing a check for $1,000. "For textbooks," he said with a wink. "Or whatever you need." I cried when I opened it, overwhelmed by the generosity of these people who owed me nothing but had given me everything. I sent Joyce an invitation to the graduation ceremony. I told myself I did not care if she came, but that was a lie. Part of me, the part that was still that little girl with the crayon drawing, desperately wanted her to show up, to see what I had accomplished, to be proud of me. Graduation day came bright and sunny and perfect. I sat with my class in the stadium, scanning the crowd for Joyce's face. Paul and Diane were there in the front row, beaming. Uncle Ronald was there recording everything on his phone. Joyce's seat was empty. So was Mark's. They did not come. They did not even send a card. After the ceremony, as I stood, surrounded by my grandparents and friends posing for photos and accepting congratulations, I saw Mark. He was in the parking lot loading groceries into his car. For a moment, our eyes met. He froze, clearly debating whether to approach me. Then he walked over, hands shoved in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. "Congratulations," he said. "I heard you did really well." I thanked him, my voice cold. He shifted his weight, looking like he wanted to say more. "Look, Viola, I know things have been complicated, but Joyce and we are going through a rough patch financially. The business did not work out like we planned, and money is really tight right now. The twins are going to need help with college in a few years, and I just thought since you are doing so well, maybe you could." He trailed off, but the implication was clear. He wanted money. I looked at this man who had helped throw me out of my own home, who had stood silently by while Joyce destroyed me, and I felt a cold fury settle over me. "No," I said. "Absolutely not." Mark's face flushed. "Come on, Viola. They are your brother and sister. Do not you care about their future?" "I care about my own future," I told him. "The future I built by myself without any help from you or Joyce. You made it very clear that I was not part of your family. So no, I am not giving you money. Figure it out yourself." I walked away before he could respond, my hands shaking with adrenaline. Paul caught up with me, put his arm around my shoulders, and said, "I am proud of you." I knew in that moment that I had made the right choice. College was everything I hoped it would be, and more. The university was large and anonymous, a place where I could reinvent myself. I threw myself into my studies, majoring in economics with a minor in business administration. I joined clubs, made friends, went to parties, and slowly learned how to be a normal young adult. But I also worked. I worked constantly. I had 2 part-time jobs, one at the campus bookstore and one tutoring other students. I was terrified of debt, terrified of depending on anyone, terrified that if I slowed down for even a moment, I would lose everything I had fought so hard to build. My sophomore year, I met David. He was in my advanced microeconomics class, always sitting in the front row, always asking questions that showed he had done more than just the assigned reading. We got paired together for a group project, and I quickly realized he was not like the other students. He was not just going through the motions, checking boxes on his way to a degree. He was genuinely passionate about economics, about business, about building something meaningful. We started studying together, then getting coffee together, then spending hours in the library talking about everything from market theory to our childhood dreams. David came from money. His father was a successful investment banker, his mother a lawyer. He had grown up in a world of private schools and country clubs and summer homes, but he was not spoiled or entitled. He was curious, thoughtful, and surprisingly humble. He wanted to understand how the world worked, how people made decisions, how systems could be changed for the better. He also had an uncanny ability to see through people's facades, which made him both an excellent student and a somewhat unnerving friend. One night we were in the library working on a paper about income inequality. I was on my 3rd cup of coffee, exhausted from a double shift at the bookstore, and I was struggling to focus. David looked up from his laptop and asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine, just tired. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You push yourself really hard, Viola. Harder than anyone else I know." "Why?" It was a simple question, but it cracked something open inside me. I found myself telling him about Joyce, about being sent away, about the anger that still burned in my chest, about my need to prove that I was worth something. David listened without judgment, and when I finished, he said something I had not expected. "You are doing this for revenge, aren't you? Not just for yourself. You want to throw your success in your mother's face." I started to deny it, but he held up a hand. "I am not saying it is wrong. I get it. But just make sure that somewhere along the way you start doing it for you. Because if your mother is the only reason you are working this hard, she still has power over you. She is still controlling your life. You will never really be free until you are doing this because you want it, not because you want to hurt her." His words haunted me for weeks. Was he right? Was my entire life still revolving around Joyce, even though I had not seen her in years? The thought was infuriating and terrifying in equal measure. Junior year, I started getting calls from Joyce again. They had increased in frequency, always with the same pattern. She would start with small talk, ask about school, then casually mention that things were difficult for her and Mark, that the twins were growing up and needed so much, that she had heard I was doing well. The subtext was always the same. She wanted money. I never gave it to her. But the calls wore me down, each one, a reminder that Joyce would always see me as a resource to be exploited, never as a daughter to be loved. Then Uncle Ronald called. "Viola," he said, "I think you should know what is going on with your mother." I braced myself. He told me that Joyce and Mark's financial situation had gone from bad to dire. They had started an online retail business, selling imported home goods, convinced it would be their ticket to easy money. They had sunk their savings into it, taken out loans, even borrowed money from friends. The business had failed spectacularly within 18 months. Now they were drowning in debt, facing foreclosure on the house, and Mark was barely keeping his job at the pharmaceutical company. The twins were 12 now, asking questions about why they had to move, why they could not afford the things their friends had. "It is a mess," Ronald said, "and Joyce is desperate." I asked if he was telling me this because he thought I should help. He was quiet for a long moment. "I am telling you this because I know she is going to come for you," he said. "And I want you to be prepared. She is going to act like it is your responsibility to save her. Like you owe her something because she gave birth to you. But you do not owe her anything, Viola. She made her choices, and she has to live with the consequences." I thanked him and hung up, my mind racing. Part of me felt a savage satisfaction knowing that Joyce was suffering, but another part of me felt sick. Was I a terrible person for being happy about my mother's misery? David and I were officially dating by senior year. It had happened gradually, naturally, a friendship deepening into something more. He was the first person who truly knew me, who had seen all my scars and jagged edges and loved me anyway. We talked about the future often. He wanted to start a consulting firm, something small and focused on helping businesses make ethical decisions. I wanted to work for a major corporation, climb the ladder as fast as possible, make enough money that I would never have to worry about stability again. Our goals were different, but we supported each other fiercely. Graduation came and went, another milestone that Joyce missed. I had stopped expecting her to show up, stopped hoping she would care. Paul and Diane were there, of course, along with Uncle Ronald and David's parents who had flown in for the ceremony. They all took me out to an expensive dinner afterward, toasting my future and showering me with gifts and advice. I had a job lined up at a prestigious consulting firm in the city, a starting salary that seemed impossibly high, and an apartment already rented with David as my roommate. Everything was falling into place. My first few years working were brutal. The consulting firm worked their junior staff like dogs, with 70-hour weeks being standard and 80 not uncommon. I was traveling constantly, living out of hotels, eating meals at my desk, and barely sleeping. But I was good at it. Brilliant, even. I had an instinct for numbers, for seeing patterns in data that others missed, for distilling complex information into clear recommendations. Within 18 months, I was promoted. Within 3 years, I was leading my own projects. Within 5, I was being courted by other firms, offering even more money, better titles, faster paths to partnership. During this time, Joyce continued to call. The calls became more desperate, more transparent. She no longer bothered with small talk. She just asked for money. For the twins' education. For the mortgage. For medical bills. For car repairs. Always with the same justification. They were family. I was doing so well. Surely I could spare a little to help them out. I said no every time, and every time Joyce's voice would take on an edge. "You have always been selfish, Viola. Even as a child. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me." The gaslighting was breathtaking. She had given me nothing, and we both knew it. But she was trying to rewrite history to paint herself as the victim, and me as the ungrateful daughter. I started seeing a therapist during my 6th year at the firm. David had suggested it gently, pointing out that I was burning out, that the anger I carried was eating me alive. The therapist, Dr. Chen, was a small woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a gentle manner. She did not let me hide behind my defenses. She pushed me to examine my motivations, my relationships, my sense of self-worth. "Are you happy, Viola?" she asked during one session. "With all your success, all your money, all your accomplishments, are you actually happy?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe that I had won, that I had proven Joyce wrong, that I had built a life worth living. But sitting in Dr. Chen's office, I had to admit the truth. I was not happy. I was driven, successful, and miserable. I was still living my life in reaction to Joyce, still measuring my worth by whether I had surpassed her expectations, still waiting for the moment when I could throw my success in her face and watch her realize what she had lost. David was right. Joyce still had power over me. Doctor Chen helped me see that revenge is a trap. That as long as I was focused on hurting Joyce, I was giving her control over my life. That true freedom meant building a life I wanted, not just a life that would make her jealous. It was hard work, painful work, digging through years of trauma and resentment. But slowly I started to shift. I started making choices because they made me happy, not because they would impress anyone. I started taking time off work. I started nurturing my relationship with David. I started visiting Paul and Diane more often, spending lazy Sundays at their house instead of working. I started building a life that felt like mine. The year I turned 32, I made partner at the firm. It came with a massive pay increase, a corner office, and the kind of prestige that would have seemed impossible 10 years earlier. David threw me a surprise party, inviting all our friends and colleagues. Paul and Diane came beaming with pride. Uncle Ronald came bringing champagne and jokes about how I was going to be richer than him soon. It was a perfect night, surrounded by people who loved me, celebrating a genuine achievement. And for the first time, I was not thinking about Joyce at all. I was not imagining her reaction or planning what I would say if she found out. I was just happy. But Joyce found out anyway. Uncle Ronald, in a moment of uncharacteristic indiscretion, mentioned my promotion to her during a phone call. He told me about it afterward, apologetic. "I am sorry, Viola. She asked how you were doing and I was proud of you, so I told her. I did not think she would." He trailed off, but I knew what he meant. He did not think she would come after me for money. But of course she did. That was who Joyce was. The call came 3 days later. Joyce was crying, which should have been my first clue that this was going to be bad. She told me she was so proud of me, that she had always known I would do great things. It was such transparent manipulation that I almost laughed. Then she told me why she was really calling. Mark had lost his job. They were about to be evicted from their rental. Kevin and Alice were both in college, now taking out massive student loans because Joyce and Mark could not help them at all. She needed me, she said. Not for her, but for them. For the twins. They were my family. Did not I care about their future? I told her I would think about it. It was not true, but I needed time to process. I talked to David, to Dr. Chen, to Paul and Diane. They all said the same thing. It was my decision, but I did not owe Joyce anything. That the twins, while innocent, were not my responsibility. That Joyce had made her choices and now she had to live with them. I knew they were right. But there was still a part of me, that little girl with the crayon drawing, that wanted to help. That wanted to be the bigger person. That wanted to prove I was not like Joyce. Dr. Chen helped me work through it. Helping them would not change anything, she said. Joyce would not suddenly become a good mother. She would not apologize or take responsibility. She would just see you as an ATM, a resource to be tapped whenever she needed money. And you would be right back where you started, defining yourself in relation to her instead of building your own life. Is that what you want? I knew the answer. I called Joyce back and told her no. I told her that Kevin and Alice were welcome to reach out to me directly if they wanted a relationship, but I was not giving her money. She lost it. She screamed at me, called me every name in the book, told me I was a heartless monster who had always been a disappointment. "I am your mother," she shrieked. "You owe me everything." I hung up and blocked her number. 2 weeks later, Joyce showed up at my house. I do not know how she got my address, but there she was on my doorstep on a Saturday morning, with Mark hovering behind her, looking even more defeated than usual. I was in my pajamas, coffee in hand, planning a lazy day with David. Instead, I opened the door to find the two people I least wanted to see in the world standing on my porch. Joyce looked terrible. She had aged badly, her face lined with stress and her clothes cheap and worn. Mark looked worse, gray and hunched, like he had given up on life. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Joyce started talking before I could tell them to leave. She apologized for yelling at me on the phone. She said she had been stressed and scared, and she had not meant what she said. She asked if she could come in, if we could talk like adults. Something about the way she said it made me step aside and let them in. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I wanted to hear what she had to say. Maybe I was still that little girl hoping her mother would finally see her. Whatever the reason, I let them into my home, and that was my first mistake. Joyce could not stop staring at my house. The high ceilings, the hardwood floors, the expensive furniture that David and I had carefully selected. She made comments about how nice everything was, how well I had done, how proud she was. It was nauseating. Mark just sat on my couch looking uncomfortable, his hands folded in his lap. I made coffee because I did not know what else to do. Then I sat across from them and waited for Joyce to get to the point. She started with a story about Kevin and Alice, about how they were struggling in college, how they were drowning in debt, how they were working 2 jobs each just to make ends meet. She said they were good kids who deserved better. She said it was not fair that they were suffering because of mistakes she and Mark had made. Then she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "You are their only hope, Viola. You are the only one who can help them. Please, I am begging you. They are your family." I asked her why I should help. Why now, after all these years of silence and neglect, I should suddenly care about the twins' well-being. Joyce looked stunned, like the question had never occurred to her. "Because they are your brother and sister," she said. "Because family helps family." I laughed. It was not a nice laugh. I told her that she had made it very clear when I was 16 that I was not part of her family. That she had thrown me out without a second thought. That she had chosen Kevin and Alice over me every single day of their lives. Why, I asked. Should I help the kids you chose when you threw away the kid you already had? Joyce's face hardened. She had tried the sweet approach and it had not worked, so now she was going to try something else. She told me I was being childish, that I was holding a grudge over something that had happened years ago, that she had done the best she could with limited resources, and if I could not understand that, then I was the problem. She said I had turned out fine, better than fine, so clearly she had not damaged me that badly. She said I was being selfish and vindictive, punishing innocent kids for something that was not their fault. Mark finally spoke up. His voice was weak, almost pleading. "Viola, we made mistakes. I know that, but Kevin and Alice, they are good kids. They did not ask for any of this. Can you really just turn your back on them?" I looked at him, this man who had enabled Joyce's worst impulses, who had stood by while she destroyed me, and I felt nothing but contempt. "You stood by and watched her throw me out," I said. "You did not say a word. You did not defend me. You did not even have the courage to look me in the eye. And now you want me to take responsibility for your kids. The kids you chose over me. You have got to be kidding." Joyce stood up, her face red with anger. "I did not choose them over you," she hissed. "I chose what was best for everyone. You were old enough to take care of yourself. They were babies. They needed me more. And now they need you. If you do not help them, you are no better than the selfish brat you have always been." Something inside me snapped. I stood up too, facing her across my coffee table. I told her that she was a liar, that she had not sent me away because it was best for everyone. She had sent me away because I was inconvenient, because I reminded her of a life she wanted to forget, because Mark did not want me around and she chose him over her own daughter. I told her that she had been a terrible mother and no amount of rewriting history would change that. I told her to get out of my house. Joyce lunged at me. I did not see it coming. One moment she was standing there, face twisted with rage, and the next she was across the table with her hands reaching for my throat. I stumbled backward, shocked, and she grabbed my shirt, screaming incoherently. Mark tried to pull her off, but she was beyond reason. She shoved me hard, and I hit the edge of my bookshelf, pain exploding in my shoulder. Something primal took over. I was not that scared 16-year-old anymore. I was a grown woman who had fought for everything she had, and I was not going to let Joyce hurt me again. I pushed her back with all my strength. She fell, hitting the floor hard, and for a moment everything was silent. Then Joyce started screaming again, but this time in pain. Mark was kneeling beside her, asking if she was okay, and she was clutching her wrist and yelling that I had attacked her, that I had pushed her, that I was a monster. I stood there, shaking, adrenaline flooding my system, barely able to process what had just happened. There was pounding on my door. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was shouting, asking if everything was okay. I heard her on the phone with 911, giving my address, saying there was a disturbance. I opened the door and she took one look at my face and came inside, positioning herself between me and Joyce. The police arrived within minutes. 2 officers, a man and a woman, calm and professional. Joyce immediately started accusing me of assault, saying I had invited her over just to attack her, that I had always been violent and unstable. The female officer asked me for my side of the story. I told her the truth. That Joyce and Mark had shown up uninvited, that I had let them in to talk, that Joyce had attacked me when I refused to give her money, and that I had defended myself. Mrs. Chen confirmed she had seen Joyce lunge at me through the window. Mark surprisingly backed up my story. He told the officers that Joyce had been the aggressor, that I had only pushed her in self-defense. The officers asked if I wanted to press charges. Joyce was still screaming, threatening, saying she would sue me, that she would make sure everyone knew what kind of person I really was. I looked at her, this woman who had given birth to me but had never been my mother, and I made a decision. Yes, I said. I want to press charges. The female officer nodded and read Joyce her rights. Joyce's face went from red to white. She could not believe this was happening. She kept looking at Mark, at me, at the officers, waiting for someone to say it was a mistake. But no one did. They handcuffed her and led her out of my house while she screamed that I was dead to her, that she would never forgive me, that I would regret this for the rest of my life. After they left, I sat on my couch and shook. David came home an hour later, having cut short a business trip when I called him. He held me while I cried, not tears of sadness, but of release. It was over. After 16 years of anger and pain and hoping for something that was never going to happen, it was finally over. Joyce had shown her true colors in the most dramatic way possible, and I had protected myself. I had chosen myself. For the first time in my life, I had put my own well-being above Joyce's feelings, and it felt like freedom. The legal process took weeks. Joyce was charged with assault. She tried to convince Mark to lie for her, to say I had attacked her, but he refused. He was done, he told me over the phone. Done with her lies, her manipulation, her inability to take responsibility for anything. He filed for divorce the next week and moved out with Kevin and Alice. Paul and Diane were heartbroken but not surprised. Joyce had been spiraling for years, and this was just the inevitable conclusion. They came to visit me, bringing food and support and unconditional love. Paul told me he was proud of me for standing up for myself. Diane told me she was sorry she had not seen how bad things were sooner, that she should have intervened when I was younger. I told her it was not her fault. Joyce was an adult who made her own choices. They all were. The story hit the local news. Not with names, but the details were specific enough that people figured it out. Joyce became a pariah in her community. The few friends she had left abandoned her. Her extended family cut her off. She lost her part-time job. She ended up pleading guilty to avoid jail time, accepting probation and a restraining order that forbade her from contacting me. The judge was not sympathetic. He told her that she was lucky I had shown more restraint than she had, that she was fortunate I was not pressing for more serious charges. Joyce left the courthouse a broken woman. Kevin and Alice reached out to me about 2 months after everything happened. They sent me a long email apologizing for not knowing the truth, for believing Joyce's version of events. They said they had been talking to Paul and Diane, piecing together the real story of what had happened when I was 16. They said they understood if I did not want a relationship with them, but they hoped I would give them a chance. They said they were not asking for money or help. They just wanted to know their sister. I thought about it for a long time. Dr. Chen helped me work through my feelings. On one hand, Kevin and Alice were innocent victims of Joyce's toxicity. They had been children when all this happened. They did not deserve to be punished for their mother's sins. On the other hand, building a relationship with them meant opening myself up to potential hurt. It meant letting people back into my life who were connected to the worst parts of my past. It was David who finally helped me decide. He pointed out that I did not have to make a permanent choice right now. I could take it slow, see how it went, keep my boundaries firm. If they proved themselves to be genuinely interested in a relationship, great. If not, I could walk away with a clear conscience. I met Kevin and Alice for coffee on a Sunday afternoon. They were 19 now, young adults rather than the little kids I remembered. Kevin looked like Mark, tall and sandy-haired with an easy smile. Alice looked like Joyce, but her expression was open and warm in a way Joyce's had never been. We talked for 3 hours. They told me about their lives, their struggles, their dreams. They asked about mine. They apologized over and over for not knowing, for not reaching out sooner, for believing Joyce's lies. They told me that Mark had finally told them the truth about why I had left, about what Joyce had done. They said they were angry at her, at him, at the whole situation. They said they wanted to do better. I told them that I appreciated their apology, but that rebuilding trust would take time. I told them I was not interested in being a replacement parent or a source of financial support. I told them that if they wanted a relationship with me, it would have to be genuine, based on mutual respect and honest communication. They agreed immediately. Over the next year, we built a tentative relationship. Coffee dates became occasional dinners. Texts became phone calls. They invited me to their college graduation. They asked for advice when they were job hunting. Slowly, carefully, they became my family. Not because we shared DNA, but because they chose to show up to put in the work to earn my trust. It was not perfect. There were awkward moments and painful conversations. But it was real in a way my relationship with Joyce had never been. Joyce tried to contact me a few more times over the next year. Letters sent to my office. Calls from numbers I did not recognize. Messages passed through mutual acquaintances. Every single one followed the same pattern. She was sorry. She had made mistakes. She needed help. Could I please give her another chance? I ignored them all. I had given her more chances than she deserved. I was done. Uncle Ronald kept me updated on her situation. She was living alone in a tiny apartment working at a call center, barely making ends meet. Kevin and Alice had cut her off completely. Mark was remarried and wanted nothing to do with her. She was alone, broke, and bitter. Part of me felt a savage satisfaction knowing that she was finally experiencing the consequences of her actions. But mostly I felt nothing. She was not my problem anymore. She was not my responsibility. She was just a person I used to know, someone from my past who no longer had any power over my present. David proposed on a quiet Saturday morning in our apartment, over coffee and breakfast. There was no grand gesture, no elaborate plan. Just him looking at me with those clear eyes, saying that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. That he loved me exactly as I was, scars and all. That he wanted to build a family with me, a real family based on love and choice and showing up for each other every single day. I said yes through tears, and we spent the rest of the day planning our future. Paul and Diane were thrilled. Uncle Ronald insisted on paying for the venue. Kevin and Alice asked if they could be part of the wedding party. It was everything I had never known I wanted. Family is not about blood. It is about the people who show up for you, who love you unconditionally, who support you even when you are at your worst. It is about the people who see your value even when you cannot see it yourself. Joyce was my mother, but she was never my family. Paul and Diane were. David is. And maybe someday Kevin and Alice will be too. But only if they earn it. Because I know my worth now. And I will never again settle for anything less than I deserve. The best revenge is not cruelty. It is living a life so full, so successful, so joyful that the people who tried to break you cannot help but see what they lost. So let me ask you this. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who was supposed to love you? Have you ever had to choose yourself over the people who claimed they were your family? What did you do? How did you survive? I want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if you believe that we all deserve to be valued and respected, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Because we all deserve better than what Joyce gave me. We all deserve to be loved for who we are, not for what we can give. And we all deserve to know that walking away is not giving up. It is choosing yourself. And that is the bravest thing you can ever do.